Winterfell was colder than usual that evening. The wind whispered through the halls, like it carried secrets too old to speak. Lord Eddard Stark sat in the great hall, his face hard, his eyes distant. Across from him, Robb Stark stood tall, still young, but with a warrior's fire in his heart. There had been a letter, a warning, wrapped in respectful words but soaked in danger. Maester Luwin had read it thrice, his voice shaking slightly. "Roose Bolton is not to be trusted, my lord," it had said. The words were from Howland Reed, a quiet man, but Ned trusted him more than most men alive. Robb shifted on his feet. "Father," he said, "Roose has fought well for us. At the Green Fork at Whispering Wood," Ned raised a hand. "And yet he sends his bastard to hold Winterfell while your brothers are gone. He flays prisoners even when they surrender. That is not the North's way." Robb opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew his father was right. Roose Bolton was cold, strange. His silence was louder than most men's words. And yet no one had dared challenge him openly. Not yet, but Ned Stark had seen enough. He had seen how loyalty could be a mask. He had lived through betrayal. He knew the cost of waiting too long. That night he called Robb alone into the Godswood. The leaves of the weirwood tree shivered in the wind, its red eyes watching them like it knew what was coming. "I want you to ride to the Dreadfort," Ned said quietly. "Take 100 men. Ride fast, ride without banners. Find Roose. If he resists—" He looked at Robb, his voice now heavy. "You have my command to execute him, not as punishment, as protection for our family." Robb's breath caught in his throat. This was not the way of the Starks. But then again, maybe that was the problem. The Starks had always waited too long. Jon Arryn, then King Robert. Then everything had fallen. "Yes, father," Robb said. 3 days later, Roose Bolton was taken from his own hall in the dead of night. He did not resist. He only looked at Robb and said, "I suppose your wolf finally smelled the blood." Robb said nothing. He rode back to Winterfell in silence. The execution was quiet. No drums, no horns, just snow falling slowly as Roose Bolton kneeled before the heart tree. His eyes were pale, but they held no fear. "Any last words?" Robb asked, his voice flat. Roose looked up. "You are brave, boy, but you have started something you do not understand." The sword came down, ice cut clean through flesh and bone, and just like that the first move was made. Back in the south, the news travelled slowly. But when it reached Harrenhal, it arrived with more weight than the rider carrying it. The Freys were outraged. Lord Walder Frey cursed the Starks for killing their friend. Tywin Lannister smiled for the first time in weeks, but the man who was most affected was a bastard with pale eyes and a cruel heart. Ramsay Snow, when he heard his father was dead, something inside him broke. Or maybe something that was already broken began to grow. At Winterfell, Ned stood in the crypts alone, looking down at Lyanna's statue. "I won't make the same mistake again," he whispered, but war was never simple. And blood always called for more blood. What Ned Stark didn't know was that by killing Roose early, he had saved his family from one fate, but awakened a much darker storm from the north. And now, the true war had only just begun. Robb couldn't sleep. Even though the act was done, the image of Roose Bolton's pale eyes haunted him. The man had barely blinked when the sword came down, as if he had expected it, as if he had wanted it. Robb had led men into battle, watched enemies die by sword and arrow, but executing a lord of the north, especially that lord, felt different. Roose hadn't been a man loved by many, but he was feared, and fear was a powerful kind of loyalty in times like these. And now, that loyalty was gone. Winterfell felt colder than ever, even with the hearths burning day and night. The servants spoke in hushed tones. The guards stayed closer to the walls. Something hung in the air, something like a storm before it breaks. Robb walked alone through the courtyard that night, boots crunching over the fresh snow. Grey Wind followed silently beside him, ears twitching. The direwolf had been restless since the day they left the Dreadfort, growling at shadows and sniffing the wind as if expecting something. Maybe he smelled the rot of war. In the great hall, Ned Stark was speaking with Sir Roderick and Maester Luwin. The look on his face was tired, lined with the weight of too many hard decisions. As Robb entered, they fell quiet. You did what I asked, Ned said, his voice low but steady. And now we must be ready for the consequences. What consequences? Robb asked, though he already knew the answer. Ned turned to the map on the table, where small wooden figures marked castles and strongholds. The Freys, the Karstarks, maybe even the Umbers. Roose had allies, Robb, weak men who needed his strength, and bastards like Ramsay who need no excuse to burn the world. Sir Roderick leaned forward. We should send ravens. Speak plainly. Let them know why the man was put down. Lewin shook his head. Some won't care. They'll only see a Stark killing his own bannerman. It's not just the sword. It's the message it sends. Robb clenched his fists. So what were we supposed to do? Let him stay? Let him betray us from within? No, Ned said, locking eyes with his son. You did right. But doing right doesn't make you safe. It just makes you a target for men who have no use for honor. That night, far to the north, a black horse rode through the gates of the last hearth, home of House Umber. The rider wore flayed skin sewn into his cloak, Bolton's banners now worn like a wound. When the gate guards tried to stop him, he slit one's throat and maimed the other. He carried a message, not a raven, a message carved into flesh. He who flays the wolf becomes the storm. Signed, Ramsay Snow. Lord Greatjon Umber read the message in silence, his knuckles white. Mad bastard, he growled, but he's not bluffing. He wants war. His son, Smoljan, stepped forward. He'll come for us all. He'll try, the Greatjon replied, reaching for his axe. But let's see if the bastard can flay Ironwood. Back in Winterfell, Arya stood in the godswood, her hand resting on the rough bark of the weirwood tree. She had watched the execution from the shadows, watched Roose Bolton kneel without begging, without fear. I would have done it slower, she whispered. Bran beside her said nothing. He was changing lately, quieter, older in the eyes somehow. Sometimes he spoke of dreams where wolves talked and trees whispered secrets. This isn't over, he said softly. That man, his death started something, Arya frowned. What do you mean? Bran looked up at the weirwood. He's dead. But something worse is alive now. And just beyond the trees, a raven landed, black wings flapping in the wind. Tied to its leg was a scroll. Robb read it first. His face turned pale. He passed it to Ned, whose hands trembled only slightly as he read, To the wolves of the north, you've slain a Bolton. Now the bastard rides. Winter is coming, but I bring the flaying first. Ramsay Snow, true heir of the Dreadfort, no seal, no respect, just threat and venom. Ned placed the letter down slowly. Ramsay wants to be seen. He wants to be feared, and he will be, Robb said. But not in the way he thinks, Ned nodded. Then we prepare. Call the banners. We deal with the bastard of Bolton before he becomes the butcher of the north, and somewhere, far in the woods, surrounded by dead men and tortured screams, Ramsay Snow smiled, sharpening his blade. He had nothing left to lose, and monsters fight hardest when they have no leash. Snow fell thick on the north. It didn't fall softly. This snow came down like punishment. The wind screamed through the pines, and the ground swallowed tracks as fast as men could make them. It was the kind of cold that stripped the breath from your lungs and reminded you how easy it was to die out here. But Ramsay Snow didn't mind. He wore no sigil, only the skin of the man he had killed 2 nights ago. Karstark's scout, who had tried to sneak through the woods near the weeping water. Ramsay had slit his throat and kept his face, literally. Now it hung from his belt like a badge of honor. He crouched by a fire, sharpening a blade that didn't need sharpening. It was just something to do while he thought. His men, if you could call them that, sat nearby. Cutthroats, flayers, bastards, and broken men. The kind of soldiers who didn't ask for coin, just chaos. He thinks he's won, Ramsay whispered, eyes wild with firelight. Little Lord Wolf, riding high on honor and Daddy's sword. He chuckled. He thinks killing father made him safe. He leaned back, raising the blade to his mouth and dragging it slowly across his tongue, just enough to bleed. Let's see how safe he feels. When I feed him his mother's bones, the others laughed. Cruel, broken laughs. Men who'd never known warmth. They were marching for Winterfell. Back inside the castle, Robb trained harder than ever. Every morning started before sunrise. Sword drills, shield work, archery. Grey Wind watched from the shadows like a ghost. Robb wasn't just preparing for battle. He was preparing for something deeper, something colder. Revenge. Ramsay hadn't even struck yet. And still, Robb could feel him, like a knife hovering just behind the heart. Maester Lewin had brought news from White Harbour. Lord Wyman Manderley had pledged his ships to House Stark. Even the Mormonts of Bear Island had sent warriors. But the Karstarks hadn't answered. The Glovers were silent. "Too many cracks in the stone. We need them," Ned said that night, pacing the solar. "If we fight Ramsay without their support, we risk bleeding the North for a bastard's game." "But we killed Roose," Robb said. "That made us the enemy to men like Karstark, even if it was the right thing." Ned paused, then sat. The candlelight showed just how old he looked now. Older than his years, tired from choices that had no good endings. "Then it's time we stop waiting for answers. It's time we remind the North who we are." 2 days later, Ned and Robb rode out. Not south. Not to war, but to the Karstarks themselves. They arrived at Carhold after 5 days of brutal riding. The gates opened, but the mood was colder than the wind. Lord Rickard Karstark waited in the hall, his eyes like ice, his voice full of contempt. "You killed a Lord of the North, Lord Stark, and now you come here like nothing's changed?" "I came to explain," Ned said calmly. "And to ask if you're still with us." Rickard slammed a cup to the floor. "You should have asked before you took his head. He was no friend to me, but he was still ours. You made yourself king while wearing a traitor's crown." Robb stepped forward. "No one declared me king, no?" Rickard spat. "But look at you, riding like one, ordering deaths like one. You think the North will follow boys with swords just because their father had honor?" Ned's voice rose, rare but powerful. "Then who will they follow? Roose Bolton's bastard, a man who flays children and sends skins instead of ravens." Rickard said nothing. "You may not like what I did," Ned continued, "but I did it to protect every man, woman and child in the North. If that makes me a traitor, then hang me. But don't you dare pretend loyalty means turning your back while a monster builds his army." For a moment, silence hung like a blade between them. Then Rickard Karstark gave a slow, grudging nod. "I won't kneel," he said, "but I won't stop you either. The North remembers, but it also watches. Don't give us more reasons to regret trusting wolves." They rode out the next morning, but while they tried to unite the North, Ramsay was already inside it. At a lonely inn near the King's Road, 5 Stark soldiers were flayed and hung from the rafters, their entrails spelling a message in blood. "The bastard comes, and he brings the night." In the dark corners of the North, villagers began locking their doors before sunset. Ravens flew slower, as if afraid. The old songs returned, songs of red kings and skinless men riding dogs made of bone. Winter was coming, but it wasn't snow they feared now. It was Ramsay. Snow buried the North, but blood still steamed when spilled. At the village of Torrens Square, the silence was unnatural. Crows didn't caw, dogs didn't bark. Only the whimpering of survivors echoed in the corners of burned homes. Smoke drifted lazily from what was once a sept, now blackened to bone. Robb Stark arrived too late. The fires were dying, but the stench remained. Burnt flesh, spoiled meat, something worse. A child's body hung upside down from the rafters of a barn, his skin peeled like fruit. Around him a message was painted in blood across the wood. "Stark blood breeds soft wolves. Let me teach you fear." Robb didn't speak. He didn't move. His eyes locked on the corpse until Grey Wind let out a low, mournful growl. Ned stood beside him, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes hollow. "He's not just raiding, he's performing." Robb looked at his father. "He's trying to provoke us." "No," Ned whispered. "He's trying to break us." The North had seen war, but not this. This was something different. This was personal. Ramsay wasn't just targeting soldiers. He was targeting symbols, villages loyal to the Starks, old families, septs, godswoods. He didn't care about land. He cared about legacy. about turning the wolf into prey, and worse, he was doing it well. 3 days after Torrens Square, ravens arrived from Deepwood Motte. The Glover scouts had gone missing. A week later, a merchant caravan was found near the Wolfswood. The horses butchered, the women skinned, the flayed man was everywhere. Even if Ramsay's army wasn't. Panic spread like wildfire under the snow. Inside Winterfell's war room, the air was tense. "We can't chase shadows forever," Sir Roderick said. "He hits and runs. His men vanish before we can respond." "He's trying to divide us," said Master Lewin, laying more red markers on the map. "Strike enough places and the bannermen will panic. They'll start guarding their own homes instead of riding with us." "He's bleeding the north," Ned murmured. "One cut at a time." Arya stood in the corner, her hands balled into fists. "Then we find him. And we kill him." Bran looked up from his seat. "He doesn't fear death. That's what makes him strong." "No," Robb said, his voice like iron. "That's what makes him reckless." He turned to Ned. "Let me hunt him." Ned hesitated. "I know the woods," Robb continued. "He can't hide forever. Let me take Grey Wind, 20 of our best trackers. No banners, no noise. Just blood for blood." Ned stared at his son, the same boy he'd once carried on his shoulders, now asking to bring back a head. "You have 5 days," Ned finally said. "Find him. But don't lose yourself in that snow." Robb nodded once. No smile, no pride. Just war. That night he left Winterfell in silence. They rode light and fast, shadows among the trees. Grey Wind led the way, sniffing out trails others would miss. Ramsay had grown bold, but even bold men left footprints in the frost. On the 4th day they found a trail, half-covered tracks, and the remains of a gutted deer, arranged like a man kneeling. Ramsay's sick way of sending a message. Robb didn't smile. By dusk, they reached a hollow deep in the Wolfswood. Smoke, a fire, figures moving, but something was off, too quiet. No lookouts, no dogs barking, no guards patrolling. Robb signaled for silence and crept forward through the brush. Then he saw it, a camp, but not Ramsay's men. Stark scouts, flayed, nailed to trees, eyes gouged out. One had Robb carved across his chest, a trap. He turned to signal retreat, too late. The arrows flew fast, silent, deadly. 2 of his men fell instantly. Then the screaming began. Out of the trees came wild men, howling, scarred, some wearing faces not their own. Ramsay's beasts, bastards in all but name. They fought like animals, biting, clawing, laughing. Robb held his ground, sword flashing. Grey Wind tore through 3 men in seconds, his jaws soaked in blood, but it was chaos. Robb could barely see his own men. Then Ramsay appeared. He wore black and red, a curved dagger in each hand, his face smeared with blood. None of it his. "Well, well," he grinned, circling Robb like a wolf. "Daddy let you out to play?" Robb lunged without a word, blade striking like lightning, but Ramsay dodged, fast and fluid. "You're angry," Ramsay whispered. "Good. That's the best time to kill a wolf. When it forgets it's still a pup." They fought in the snow, steel clashing, growls echoing. Robb was stronger. Ramsay was faster, but he didn't fight to win. He fought to distract, because in the distance, back toward the path they'd taken, fires were rising. Winterfell was burning. Robb's heart stopped. Those flames in the distance weren't campfires. They were too large, too wild. They were rising like dragons made of fire, and only one place behind them could burn like that. Winterfell. "No!" Robb shouted, pushing Ramsay back with a furious strike. Ramsay only laughed, stepping away with twisted joy. "Run, puppy, run home. See what I've done." Robb slashed again, but Grey Wind leaped forward first, forcing Ramsay to dodge. The bastard rolled into the snow, still laughing as he disappeared into the dark forest like a ghost. The screams of Robb's men brought him back to the moment. The ambush had been brutal, and now the survivors were wounded and shaken. But there was no time. Robb mounted his horse. "Who can ride?" he shouted. 6 battered men stepped forward. "We can, my lord." "Then we ride," Robb commanded. "Now!" They left the dead behind. Left Ramsay behind. Left everything except the single goal burning in Robb's chest. Save Winterfell. Save his family. Back at Winterfell, chaos reigned. The attack had come like a nightmare. One moment the gates were closed, the guards at their posts, the walls strong. The next, explosions, smoke, flaming arrows raining from all sides. Screams filling the night. Arya grabbed her wooden practice sword, face fierce as a she-wolf. Bran sat in his chair, terrified but silent, watching with eyes that seemed to see more than the attack, as if he saw something behind it. Maester Luwin tried to gather villagers into the great hall, but terror had already spread too far. Dogs barked, children cried. The ravens flew wildly, banging against the cages as if they could sense the coming doom. And in the courtyard, something far worse arrived. 20 men, wearing flayed skins, dripping blood. They howled as they killed, spears and axes flashing in the firelight. These were Ramsay's monsters, the kind who enjoyed killing more than breathing. Sir Rodrik met them with steel in hand. Old but still strong, he cut down 2 before a spear pierced his leg. He grunted, pulling the blade out and fighting on, refusing to fall. Arya ran toward him. "Sir Rodrik, come inside." "Back, girl," he shouted. "Inside now!" One attacker nearly reached Arya before Sir Rodrik took the blow himself, a deep slash to the chest. Arya screamed. Bran, watching from the doorway, felt something inside him snap, like a door opening deep in his mind. His eyes faded and suddenly, grey wind roared inside his head. For a moment, Bran wasn't Bran. He was teeth and fur and fury, crashing through the burning gates. Grey wind tore into Ramsay's soldiers like a storm. Flesh ripped, bones cracked, men cried for mercy that would not come. They had brought fear. Grey wind brought death, but there were too many. The north was bleeding. Robb and his riders reached the castle just as the last flames swallowed the stables. Winterfell burned red against the black sky. Robb didn't think. He rushed in with grey wind leading like a shadow of death. He cut down the first flayed man without slowing. Another tried to stab him. Robb blocked and struck his throat. Grey wind ripped another apart. "Father!" "Arya! Bran!" Robb screamed through the fire and smoke. Inside the great hall, Ned Stark stood tall with sword in hand, protecting the last civilians. His cloak was burned, his face blackened with smoke, but his stance was unbroken. Robb ran to him. "Father, Arya and Bran, safe for the moment," Ned said. "But this won't stop. Ramsay will come again." Robb's eyes burned. "Then let him. I'll kill him with my bare hands." Suddenly, a horn blew from outside the walls, a mocking, jagged sound. Ramsay's signal. A message was tossed over the wall, a sack soaked in blood. Robb kicked it open. Inside was the head of one of his men, and a piece of flayed skin shaped like a wolf. Robb fell silent, rage shaking his hands. Ned looked at him, voice calm but filled with fire. "You asked me once how to be a leader. Tonight, this is how. Protect your family, defend the north, and kill the ones who seek to destroy it." Robb nodded, tears burning behind his eyes. "I swear." Ramsay Snow will die. Winterfell still stood, but barely. The north was awake now. The wolves had been wounded, and wounded wolves bite the hardest. Winterfell's flames died slowly, leaving behind black walls, ash-covered stone, and a sky that smelled like smoke and heartbreak. Even the snow looked dirty, stained by what had happened, but the Starks were alive, and survival changes people. Robb stood in the courtyard, watching bodies being carried away, men who had sworn to protect his home, women who never should have seen war, children who would never laugh again. His knuckles were white around his sword hilt. Grey wind stood beside him, hackles still raised, as if ready to tear into anyone who moved wrong. Ned came limping toward him. His shoulder was wrapped in bandages. He'd taken a spear trying to protect a farmer's boy. "You need rest," Robb said, stepping forward to help. Ned shook his head. "Rest comes later. Justice comes now." Robb looked his father in the eyes and saw the old Ned Stark was gone. This Ned wasn't just a lord. He was a wolf ready to kill monsters. Maester Luwin hurried over with bad news. "My lords, we found this." He held a wooden box, small but heavy. Robb opened it slowly. Inside was a flayed direwolf paw. A small one. Robb felt his heart tear. Shaggy dog? Lewin nodded with sadness in his eyes. They must have taken Osha and Rickon. Shaggy dog tried to protect them. Arya's scream ripped across the courtyard. She ran forward, grabbing the box and shaking it as tears streamed down her face. No, he wouldn't lose. He's strong. He's... Ned held her tight as she sobbed into his chest. Bran stared from his chair, silent as ice. But the rage in his eyes was older than any child his age should have known. Ramsay Snow hadn't only attacked Winterfell, he had taken a Stark cub, and that meant war. That same night, Ned gathered his council around a rough map of the north. Their voices echoed in the great hall, tired but determined. Sir Roderick, wounded but alive, slammed his fist onto the table. "We march to the Dreadfort and burn it to the ground." "No," Ned replied. "That's what he wants. We storm his walls. He kills Rickon. He beats us with fear before we reach his gate. He's using Rickon as bait," Robb said. "But we can turn that against him." "How?" asked Lewin. Robb pointed to the map. "Ramsay thinks we'll charge north. But he wasn't born in those walls. He's not a true Bolton. He just stole their power. His pride will make him impatient. He'll chase us outward, into the Wolfswood." He tapped an area surrounded by deep forest and valleys, the crooked hills, narrow ground. A ground, Sir Roderick smiled despite his pain. "Trap the hunter." "And make him the hunted," Robb finished. Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "This is your plan. You will lead the fight." Robb swallowed, heart pounding. This wasn't training. This wasn't following orders. This was command, and the entire North was now depending on him. While the Starks planned, Arya stood alone in the Godswood. Her face was dry now, but dry like a blade. A man stepped from the shadows, hooded, lean, eyes sharp like a fox. Jurgen Hagar, the strange prisoner they'd saved from the fire months ago. "You had 3 deaths to give," he said quietly. "But the girl only chose 2. Arya looked up sharply. She had forgotten. Jaqen tilted his head. "A final name." "Speak it." Arya didn't hesitate. "Ramsay Snow." Jaqen smiled slowly. "A hard man. A bad man. Many would cheer his end. Can you kill him?" she demanded. "Many things a man can do," he said, touching her cheek softly. "But not all things are simple. The bastard of Bolton walks with death around him. Even to strike, a man must get close. A girl must be patient." "I'm done being patient," Arya whispered. Jaqen's expression softened. "Then a girl must learn something new." He handed her a small, thin blade, sharper than any she had ever seen. "A gift," he said. "For a wolf who wishes to bite." Arya stared at it. "Does it have a name?" "Yes," Jaqen said. "Mercy." Her fingers closed tightly around the hilt. Ramsay Snow had started a war. Now Arya Stark would help finish it. Robb stood on the battlements, looking out into the cold north. He could almost hear Ramsay laughing somewhere in the darkness. "Brother," Bran said quietly, rolling his chair beside him. "When you fight him, don't let him get inside your head." Robb knelt beside him. "I won't, I promise." Bran shook his head. "Not that head." He tapped Robb's chest. "This one. He wins when you hate more than you protect." Robb stared at his little brother, surprised at how old he suddenly sounded. Then Bran whispered something else, his voice distant. "Be careful in the hills." "Ramsay is not the only danger there." Robb frowned. "What do you mean?" Bran's eyes seemed to drift, like he was looking beyond the castle walls into the far, cold dark. "The old things are waking," he said. "Not all wolves howl for Starks anymore." Robb felt a chill deeper than winter, but he stood anyway, because tomorrow they marched to hunt a monster, and he would not fail again. The crooked hills were a jagged line of stone and ice, twisting forests, deep valleys, cliffs sharp enough to kill a man with one wrong step. It was a place where sunlight barely touched the ground, and shadows ruled like old kings, perfect for a trap. Robb Stark and his forces moved silently through the trees. No banners, no horns, just steel, breath, and anger. Grey wind padded ahead, sniffing the cold air, searching for the scent of flayed skin. Every step Robb took felt heavier, not from fear, but from purpose. Ramsay had crossed a line no one crossed and lived. Rickon, a child, Robb would burn the bastard's world for that. Behind him rode men who believed in Robb, in Ned, in the north. They whispered a name as they marched, the young wolf. Robb didn't feel like a wolf yet, but he would. Hours passed. Then grey wind suddenly stopped, muscles stiffening. His growl rumbled like thunder. Robb raised his fist. Halt! The scouts spread out. Snowflakes drifted slowly to the ground. Silence. Then heard a scream. Robb kicked his horse forward. The trees opened into a clearing, and there stood a horror. One of the umber men, flayed alive but still breathing, tied to a tree. His eyes wide with agony. Robb dismounted, heart pounding. He knelt beside the dying man. "Robb." "Stark," the man gasped. "They knew you'd be on the ground, carved into the snow with a severed finger. Come find the pupe." Robb stood. "Rickon is near, then the horns, 2 blasts." North side, Ramsay's men poured from the trees, screaming like demons. Arrows rained from the cliffs above. Robb's forces formed a shield wall, but men screamed as bolts ripped into legs, necks, faces. "Forward," Robb ordered. "Break through. Find my brother." Grey wind lunged into the flayers. Blood sprayed white snow. Robb fought beside him, sword-carving arcs of vengeance. He moved with fury, with skill, not stopping, not thinking, cutting through anyone in his way. His blade found bone and sinew. Grey wind tore a man's throat out and shook his body like a toy. For a moment, Robb felt unstoppable, but then came the dogs, huge black beasts with eyes red as coals. They hit like warhammers, biting through armor. One dragged a Glover soldier into the trees, screaming. "Ramsay's hunting hounds," someone shouted. "The man-eaters." Robb saw one charging Bran's old friend Hodor. No, not Hodor, a young soldier from Winterfell who had grown up carrying firewood. The man froze in fear. Robb sprinted, plunging his sword through the dog's skull just inches from the boy. He wasn't fighting to win a battle. He was fighting to save every Stark life he still could. Then a voice cut through the chaos like a razor made of laughter. "Well fought, little wolf." Ramsay Snow stood atop a ridge, holding something small by a rope, a small form, a child, bound, crying. Rickon. Robb's chest tightened. Fear, rage, helplessness all at once. Ramsay dangled Rickon over the edge. "Come and get him!" "Rickon!" Robb roared. He charged, but grey wind tackled him down, growling, not holding him back, warning him, because Ramsay wasn't alone. From the shadows behind the bastard, something stepped out, tall, cloaked in leather and skin, eyes blank white, a weir servant, a relic of the Old North, a man twisted by blood magic, a creature that served trees older than castles. Robb froze. Ramsay grinned. "Did you think only wolves have gods, Robb Stark?" Robb couldn't breathe for a moment. The weir servant raised a carved bone knife to Rickon's throat. "No!" Robb screamed. "Take me!" "Take my head, please." Ramsay smiled wider. How sweet! Blood touched the blade. And suddenly a black arrow flew through the air and buried itself in the creature's skull. Rickon fell and rolled down the yard. Snow away from the blade. Robb whipped around. A girl stood in the trees, small, lean, dressed in darkness. A thin sword and a small bow, Arya Stark. She charged, screaming, not with fear, with vengeance. The battle surged again, fiercer, louder, bloodier. Stark men rallied. Grey wind leaped. Sir Roderick's axe swung. The umbers howled. Robb reached Rickon first, wrapping his brother in his arms. Rickon sobbed, "Robb! Robb!" Robb kissed his messy hair. "I'm here. I've got you." But when he looked up, Ramsay was gone. He had slipped into the forest like smoke. Only his laughter remained, echoing through the frozen air. "You can't protect them forever, young wolf. I'll flay every last Stark." Robb stared into the darkness he'd escaped into. Not fear in his eyes, not grief, pure, silent, deadly wolf. The North had struck back, but Ramsay Snow was still out there. And the final hunt had only just begun. Winter hit harder than ever. The North lay wounded, villages burned, families broken, banners torn. But the wolves were not defeated, they were hunting. Robb Stark stood in the courtyard of Winterfell as dawn broke. Snowflakes sparkled like tiny knives in the pale light. Soldiers moved with purpose, sharpening blades, checking armor. This was no longer an army fighting for survival. They were fighting for justice. Ramsay Snow had escaped into the shadows, but he could not hide forever. Every day, scouts brought news. Sightings, disappearances, more threats carved into bone or bark. But one message mattered most. Ramsay had returned to the Dreadfort, the bastard's castle. His home, his den. Robb didn't flinch. "We end this today." Ned stood beside him, more tired than ever, but still strong. Arya leaned against the wall, her small, thin blade Mercy hidden beneath her cloak. Bran watched silently, eyes distant, like he knew what was coming. Rickon hugged Grey Wind's neck, refusing to let go until Maester Luwin pulled him back. Robb knelt, holding Rickon's hands. "I'm coming back," he promised. Rickon sniffled, tears frozen on his cheeks. "Promise like Dad." Robb looked to Ned and nodded. "Stronger than Dad," he said softly. "I swear it." Rickon hugged him hard. "Bite him," he whispered. Robb smiled at that. "I will." The march to the Dreadfort was short. Ramsay wanted them to come. His banners hung high above the red stone walls, the man flayed alive. Robb stared at it and felt fire burn inside him. Grey Wind howled. The signal. The first wave of Stark archers let loose. The sky darkened with arrows. Screams followed. Then came the battering ram, thunder against old gates. Inside, Ramsay watched from the battlements with a grin. Welcome, wolves. The gates cracked, then splintered, then fell. Stark men surged inside like an avalanche. Blood splashed against the red walls, turning them darker. Robb fought like something more than a man. Grey Wind was pure terror on four legs, ripping, tearing, devouring fear itself. Ramsay's huntsmen died screaming. His dogs howled until silence replaced their roars. Every room they cleared brought them closer to the heart of the castle, the flaying chambers, and there Robb found him. Ramsay Snow sat casually on a pile of human bones, holding a dagger as if it were a feather. His eyes shined with madness. "You brought the whole pack," Ramsay said, smiling. "I'm flattered." Robb raised his sword. "No more talking." Ramsay stood. "Oh, but talking is the best part. Did Rickon cry when I took his mutt's paw? Did you hear his screams when Robb lunged?" Their swords clashed with metal fury. Robb struck hard, and Ramsay dodged fast. The bastard fought like a snake, quick, slippery, cruel. "You're angry." Ramsay laughed, slashing Robb's arm. "Good, angry wolves make mistakes." Grey Wind lunged, but Ramsay stabbed him in the side, twisting the blade. Grey Wind yelped, a sound that broke something deep inside Robb. Ramsay laughed harder. "Cry, little wolf." Robb didn't cry. He became a storm. He smashed into Ramsay, knocking him to the ground. His sword fell. Ramsay scrambled, reaching for another blade, but Robb kicked him hard. Ramsay coughed up blood, but still smiled wider. "Do it! Be like me!" Robb raised his sword. "No," said a voice behind him, Arya. She walked forward, eyes dark and calm. "Not a sword," she whispered. "Something sharper." She held up Mercy, the blade Jaqen had given her. Robb stared. Arya nodded once. "This is my kill." Robb stepped back. He trusted her. Ramsay crawled away, suddenly afraid. Get that thing away!" Arya struck fast, no hesitation, no mercy. The blade slid across his throat like a whisper. Ramsay's eyes widened. Shock, then fear, then nothing. He fell. The bastard of Bolton was dead. Arya breathed out slowly. "For Rickon. For Shaggy Dog. For everyone?" Robb knelt beside Grey Wind, hands shaking. The direwolf's wound was deep, too deep. Grey Wind licked his hand once, eyes soft with love. And pride, then his head lowered, and he was still. Robb broke. He held Grey Wind and cried into the wolf's fur. His tears, falling like part of his soul, was leaving with him. Ned watched from the doorway. Sorrow, pride, pain, all at once. He whispered, "The price of protecting family?" Arya put a hand on Robb's shoulder. "He died a wolf," Robb wiped his eyes. "Then we make sure the North never forgets." The war was done. The North united behind House Stark like never before. Rickon was safe. Winterfell rebuilt. The flayed man banners burned into nothing. People whispered a new name for Robbie. Stark, the wolf who struck first. He didn't win because he was cruel. He won because he was willing to do what the Starks never did in time. Act before the enemy strikes, and because he never stopped being a protector, even when it cost him everything.